Turn it up!
CEO on disagreeing with Trump. We're cowards if we don't. General Electric CEO Jeff Immelt says he tries to stay out of politics, but he's found it necessary to speak out against some of President Trump's policies. I think we're cowards if we don't take a position occasionally on those things that are really consistent with what our mission is and where our people stand, Immelt told CNN's Fareed Zakaria. Tune into GPS on Sunday at 10 a.m. ET to watch the full interview. Immelt explained why he has come out against Trump's travel ban, his position on climate change, and his decision to build a border wall with Mexico. Has poured $300 billion into its environmental initiative, called Ecomnation, over the past 12 years. Immelt said he believes in working to help protect the environment, and that's why he spoke out against Trump's rollback of environmental regulation. And as a multinational corporation, Immelt said had to stand against the travel ban. Related, Trump's formidable foe on immigration, corporate America. We have a lot of people that live in the Middle East. We have a lot of people that travel. It's my duty to stand up for them, he said. But Immelt, a member of Trump's Manufacturing Council, doesn't disagree with everything the president is doing. In many ways I agree exactly with what Trump is doing, he said. He pointed to the White House's promise to pursue tax reform and infrastructure spending, as well as regulatory reform. Immelt also has faith in where the economy is headed. I still think the U.S. economy is on a steady economic growth pattern, he said, adding that economies around the world are looking stronger as well. Subscribe for Fareed's Global Briefing. But he warned about reading too much into the rise in the stock market. When you go to Wall Street, it's ultimately going to be proven out in earnings of companies and cash flow more so than, speculation of which law is going to get passed.
You have done something unusual in the last couple of months, though. You have twice to your employees come out essentially in opposition to something the administration did. On the travel ban, you expressed concerns, and on climate change policies, you expressed concerns in a memo where you essentially disagreed with the Trump administration, talked about how crucial it was that the U.S. continue to be a world leader on climate change. Why did you feel the need to do this?
Fareed, I say by and large, CEOs should kind of keep their head down and do their work. And in many ways, I agree exactly with what President Trump is doing. But we also are stewards for companies, we're stewards for brands, we're stewards for people. On the travel ban, look, we have a lot of people that live in the Middle East. We have a lot of people that travel. It's my duty to stand up for them. Clearly, we want the country to be safe, but it's also my duty to kind of stand up on their behalf. On climate, look, for 12 years, we've been investing in an initiative called Eco-Imagination, which has really talked about driving energy efficiency in everything we do. And we've been doing it consistently. We've booked over $300 billion of revenue in that initiative over the last 12 years. I just think it's insincere to not stand up for those things that you believe in. So I don't think it's something we should do every day, but I do think we're also stewards of our companies. We're representatives of the people that work with us. And I think we're cowards if we don't take a position occasionally on those things that are really consistent with what our mission is and where our people stand.
Joining me now, President Obama's head of the Federal Trade Commission, John Lebowitz. He's a partner at the law firm of Davis & Polk. He's also got a dog in this fight. He chairs the 21st Century Privacy Coalition, a group of broadband providers that support privacy protections for consumers and opposes the FCC rule. John, help me. This is very confusing. Here's how I would distill it. This all came about because the FTC, which you used to run, jurisdiction to regulate internet service providers, the FCC steps in and creates a situation where Google and Facebook will be treated differently under one set of rules than internet service providers under an alternative set of rules. How am I doing so far?
You're doing really well. That's exactly what happened when the FCC invoked Title II as a way to ensure net neutrality. They could have done it in different ways, but by invoking Title II, they took jurisdiction away from my former agency, the FTC.
Okay, so the Washington Post had this encapsulation, put it up on the screen in terms of what the rules would have done. Under the rules, internet providers must get your explicit permission to share or sell things such as your geolocation information, your health information, your children's information, your financial information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that sounds like a good thing. Like, yeah, you should have to get my explicit permission. What's wrong with that?
Well, I think as a theory, there's nothing wrong with that. I think in terms of the way that the FCC effectuated its privacy proposal or tried to, it's deeply flawed. So let me sort of take you through some of the facts. So one fact is that for 20 years, the FTC had oversight over the entire internet ecosystem, including broadband providers. And broadband providers were not selling personal information. In fact, they've all made commitments not to sell that personal information. We wrote a privacy report in 2012 where they committed to the FTC not to mine data content. Some of them did. And the truth is, if they don't honor their commitments, that's a violation under the existing statute and probably under the existing FCC statute. So protecting privacy, as you heard from Congressman Capuano, is important. It's important to all of us. But the way in which the FCC tried to do it was deeply flawed. In fact, my former agency, the FTC, wrote a comment, and at that time it was 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. It was a unanimous comment, and it identified 27 separate flaws in the FCC's draft proposal, and it called the proposal not optimal. Not optimal.
Okay,
is Washington speak.
Another issue.
Or not good. Yes.
I think the reaction of many watching the events superficially this week is to think that they just lost a boatload of privacy protections. Is it more accurate to say the status quo will continue?
Yes, it is more accurate to say the status quo will continue. But, you know, Washington, as we all know, is hyper-partisan these days, and privacy issues, which should be nonpartisan, and were nonpartisan at the FTC, have become even more partisan. There's a lot of sky is falling hyperbole. There's a little bit of privacy McCarthyism going on, and it would be great if people could sort of cut through this fact-free environment and talk about the real issues.
You ran the FTC under President Obama. Tom Wheeler ran the FCC under Obama. He wrote a very strong essay this week for the New York Times, put it up on the screen. The bill not only gives cable companies and wireless providers free rein to do what they like with your browsing history, shopping habits, your location, and other information gleaned from your online activity, but it would also prevent the FCC from ever again establishing similar consumer privacy protections. Why, in your view, is he wrong?
Well, I think he's wrong because first, if the CRA, the Congressional Review Act, is signed into law, then the FCC could write another rule. It just has to be written differently, and we think it could be written in a much smarter way. The second thing is, and this was one of the fundamental flaws, I think, in the FCC approach, it only applies to broadband providers. It doesn't apply to all the other collectors of information on the internet, including Google and Facebook and others. And in fact, in 2012, President Obama put out a Privacy Bill of Rights. The administration put out a Privacy Bill of Rights in which it called for the FTC to be the sole privacy enforcer across the internet ecosystem. And it did that because it recognizes that internet privacy should be technology neutral. It's not about who's collecting the data, Michael. It's about what data is being collected and how it's being used. And fundamentally, at the core of why we believe that the approach of the FCC is wrong. If Congress wants to do privacy protections across the board, of course it should be able to do that. But you shouldn't just regulate a sector of the economy. Let me say it more simply. From my perspective, internet service search engines like Google or Facebook, which I think know more about me than does the information I put in my browser, I'd like to see them all treated in similar fashion. Here's my final word. This is a more confusing issue than I first believed. And for those who saw the headlines that said, holy smokes, I just lost a bunch of rights, I recommend they read in. John, thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Michael.
to stay, he said. Freedom Caucus demands would lower premiums for healthy people, lower health insurance premiums. That's what's at the heart of the ongoing battle between the House Freedom Caucus and Republican leaders, particularly President Trump. Trump is attacking the band of conservative lawmakers for torpedoing the GOP bill to repeal and replace Obamacare last week. But the Freedom Caucus reiterated Friday that it will only back legislation that does more to reduce premiums. The caucus is right that the GOP bill, formally titled the American Health Care Act, would have done little to lower premiums for most Americans. Experts say, true, younger consumers would have seen their costs drop a bit, but it would have been at the expense of older folks, who would have suffered huge spikes in premiums. The bill, as originally written, did not address the main reasons why premiums for many individual market policies rose under Obamacare, the sweeping set of consumer protection mandates it imposed on the insurance industry. Under Obamacare, insurers must cover those with pre-existing conditions, provide a comprehensive set of benefits, and limit consumers' financial responsibility above a certain threshold. All of this pushed up premiums. Related, before Obamacare, some liked their health care plans better. Most Obamacare enrollees are protected by federal subsidies that are based on their income and the cost of coverage in their area. Under the GOP plan, however, consumers could feel more of the pain since they would receive a tax credit that adjusts based on an enrollee's age, not by the premiums they face. In order to drive premiums lower, the Freedom Caucus wants to take an axe to two insurance mandates: the essential health benefits provision that requires insurers to cover benefits like maternity, substance abuse, and prescription drugs, and the community rating measure, which prevents insurers from basing premiums on health status, gender, or age in a specific area. Eliminating these two requirements would likely lower premiums, but only for some consumers, and it would leave many enrollees, particularly sicker ones, on the financial hook for much more of their care. Also, it would allow insurers to effectively cherry-pick the people they want to cover. Without the essential health benefits measure, insurers could offer cheaper plans that don't cover as much. They would not have to pay for costly benefits, such as maternity or prescription drugs. They could also opt not to cover the treatments that patients with costly illnesses, such as cancer, diabetes, and hepatitis C need. That would work out well for young and healthy people who don't go to the doctor much. They could buy skimpy plans with low premiums, but it wouldn't be so good for those who need care. They would need to shell out for all the services that their insurance policy doesn't cover, and they wouldn't be shielded by Obamacare's financial protections, such as the annual limit on deductibles and copays, since those would only apply to covered benefits. Premiums would be lower, but only because insurers would cover less, so out-of-pocket costs would be higher, said Cynthia Cox, an associate director at the Kaiser Family Foundation. In the final hours before the GOP bill collapsed, the caucus convinced Republican leaders to weaken Obamacare's essential health benefits measure, leaving it to the states to determine what services should be covered. But this move spooked moderate Republicans, who were concerned it would leave their constituents with less care and bigger bills, and led to the bill being shelved. Related, Freedom Caucus leader says group holding strong against Trump. Getting rid of the community rating provision would once again let carriers base their premiums on an enrollee's health or gender. Again, healthy people would benefit from lower rates, but young women might have to pay more since they typically use more health care services and could become pregnant, and sick people could be charged sky-high premiums commensurate with how much their treatments cost, leaving some unable to afford coverage. Republican leaders were not willing last week to meet this Freedom Caucus demand, particularly since it conflicts with the broader GOP promise to protect those with pre-existing conditions. The goal of Obamacare and the Republican plan was to create a market that would be accessible for people with serious chronic illnesses, said Dan Mendelsohn, Chief Executive Officer of Avalier Health, a consulting
Let it go.